We're joined by the Reverend Pat Allerton from St Peter's Church, Notting Hill in London.
And joining Reverend Pat is comedian Loiso Gola. Welcome, both of you.
Good to see you both. Pat, we'll start
Morning,
with you. You've got a story for us. A day in court for one person who didn't like a particular label.
Yeah, this is a story from the Daily Mail, and the headline essentially says, describing workers as a grandparent is age discrimination, even if they have grandchildren. So this is a lady who took her employer to court. She was aged 62 at the time. She had grandchildren, and she took offence at a glowing review of a car that she'd been part of. She works for a car company that said that the car had performed admirably as comfy wheels for a grandparent. And she sued her company because she took offence at the, I guess, the ageism and mentioning that she was a grandparent, even though she is one. So it's a complex one, isn't it? Because is it discrimination or is it just description? I think for me, it raises the issue of the sensitivity of aging and growing old. And actually, a few weeks ago, I did a sermon on aging and how we can face it. It happens to all of us. But the hope that the resurrection of Jesus and eternal life can bring us, because when you've got eternal life to look forward to, you can relax about growing older.
I mean, Loiso, isn't it about how society sees the term grandparents? Because my wife and I, we had our daughter when we were students, and her parents, my wife's parents, were an amazing help. So I see grandparents as superheroes. I mean, they're great, sort of old and wise, it's rather than old and doddery. They're just brilliant people. How do you see it?
Well, as Africans generally, we embrace our age. Like I've encountered people who tell me, who actually instruct me, hey, you have to address me as a grand or a grandpa, you know, because, you know, there's value in aging in the community that I come from. So it's a totally different thing for me. But I just feel that if you reach 95 and stuff like that, I think you should be allowed to break one law of your choice, you know? I think we should, like, just one. Like, if you want to drink and drive, if you want to murder someone, if you want to launder diamonds, I don't know. Whatever you want to do, whatever crime you've always wanted to do, you should be able to, I think.
Well, we can't encourage any drinking driving, so we must point that out.
No, but I've got to say, you know, I think it's a very subjective thing. I think if the woman herself doesn't want to be called a grandma, I don't think people should do that. I think it should be their choice. But Loiso, you have chosen a very heartwarming tale this week. Tell us about that.
Well, there was a letter that seemingly was written a couple of decades ago by a young boy who wrote to Santa Claus, Father Christmas, as you guys call him, asking for a cowboy suit and a cat gun. And listen, I hope, you know, I hope and pray that we find this guy, you know, and we're able to kind of you know, to fulfill his childhood dream of having a cowboy suit. Yeah,
well, it's funny you should say that, because we've just had news that they found the little boy who wrote to Santa, who is now a 65-year-old ex-policeman, and Santa gave him a cap gun and a sheriff's badge. Reverend Pat, is the simple list that Robert wrote to Santa, it's lovely to see what was popular then, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I love that in the letter he basically says, you know, I want the cap gun, the hat, I think he wants the suit, and everything else. And I read that as like everything else that goes with being a cowboy. So he probably needed a horse to ride into town on. Probably needed a couple of those saloon doors, you know, to push through. Probably needed a waistcoat. I mean, cowboys seem to love waistcoats, didn't they? Which Gareth Southgate is bringing back into fashion. But I hope he got what he asked for. Clearly, he became a policeman, so he likes dressing up, likes getting into a uniform. So I hope he got it all.
Yeah, and I bet he's a really kind person, because in the message he also talks about how he hopes the Rudolph and the other reindeers got their carrots. I bet he's just a warm, kind person. Look, Christmas is certainly in the air this week. We may have just entered August, but Christmas apparently has already happened in Dunstable in Bedfordshire. So Reverend Rachel Phillips at Priory Church in St Peter in Bedfordshire has organised a Christmas celebration complete with carols and mince pies for those who missed out on Christmas Christmas celebrations, the traditional ones in December. So it included a visit from Father Christmas. As she said, the Reverend Philip said he's obviously not that busy at this time of year. But there is a real important message behind this, Pat, isn't there? That actually, she says, actually, Reverend Philip says, what Christians celebrate at Christmas doesn't just happen at one time of the year. And I was a bit worried about this initially because I'm thinking about the commercialisation of Christmas. But actually, the message of Christmas can go right through the year, can't it?
Of course. I mean, we all love celebrating birthdays, don't we? And if you think about it, we celebrate the birthdays of people who are alive on the whole. And the amazing news of Christianity and the gospel is that Jesus is still alive. He came back from the dead. And that's why we celebrate Christmas. But it doesn't just happen on one day. It's something to take through the whole year and to celebrate. I'm celebrating it, going to church after this, to celebrate Jesus's birthday today. But I do find it interesting, the idea of having Christmas in July. If it's a hot July day, I think mince pies mid-July is quite a bad choice. But this year, of course, we remember last December that Christmas got cancelled. Those were the headlines. And I was leading a carol service outside my church in the pouring rain for about 150 people when the message, the tweet, came through on our phones from the government that we're about to go into lockdown. And I saw people flock away, get in their cars to get out of town, get out of Dodge whilst they still could. So it's great to have a chance, whatever time of year, to celebrate Christmas.
Yeah, and you say about mince pies in July or the middle of summer. This is from a well-known shop. It's a Christmas sandwich. It's got turkey and stuffing. It really smells Christmassy. That feels a bit wrong. Loiso, are you feeling Christmassy at the moment?
Not at this particular moment, but here's the interesting thing. Where I come from, December is the hottest time of the year. And so my experience of Christmas is very synonymous with summer.
Yeah.
But what I find sometimes, because Christmas is so synonymous with winter as to how we consume it in media, so it'll be like 35 degrees Celsius in South Africa, and then they'll have fake snow at the mall. And you're like, no, it doesn't work.
Oh, well, look, we've just got time for one final story. It's one that I spotted about DC Comics. DC Comics brings out the first ever Jewish character in 40 years. Book's out in September. It centres on the teenage social activist Willow Zimmerman and her telepathic dog, Leibowitz. Now, Pat, superheroes replace religious leaders nowadays. Do you think Marvel has overtaken the Messiah?
Do you think they replace religious? I hope to buck the trend with that, Nina. No, I don't think anyone can ever overtake the Messiah. I mean, remember, Jesus is the original Jewish superhero conquering death. But I'm glad to see that they're building on that legacy. And I think what we see in sort of TV, in films, in comic books, is we see the human heart longing for something more and longing for someone more, someone who'll come and deliver them, someone who'll come and help them. And of course, sadly, a lot of those heroes, I mean, nearly all of them, are fictional. But we have a God in heaven who loves us, who we can look to, who isn't just made up, who doesn't just exist on the pages of a comic book. But it's great to see this superhero, and I look forward to perhaps getting a copy.
Loiso, favourite superhero? Have you got one?
Favorite superhero? Michael Jordan.
Right.
Real life superhero.
I'm going to move us on to, actually, we have got time for one more story. So Simon Rattle, last night of the proms, too jingoistic for me. So this is the head of the London Symphony Orchestra. So Simon Rattle, he avoids conducting the last night of the proms because he thinks the closing concert is too jingoistic. The BBC Proms is one of the big cultural events. We all know that, don't we? That has returned this year, launched its first night on Friday to a full house inside the Royal Albert Hall. Well, there's nothing wrong with being patriotic, is there, Pat?
Not in the right way at all, Sean. You know, and I think there's so much that we have to be proud of as a nation. I think in recent years, though, we've slightly lost our sense of self and identity, and we've sort of forgotten those things that we can be proud of. But you know, we're at the time of the Olympics. The British flag is out. We've got to take pride in who we are, remember our best bits, and come back to being the nation that welcomes the outsider, that welcomes the refugee, that goes to bless and give away to the poorest nations around the world. Let's remember who we are and put behind us any identity crisis we've been having recently.
So I noticed you were nodding there. What's the view of Brits from South Africa?
We have a very tumultuous history with the British, but you know, there were some cool cultural things that we did as kids that I know now are British. And my favorite thing about it was Guy Fawkes Day. Guy Fawkes Day was by far my favorite time. The fireworks, dressing up. For me, that, you know, that's pretty much probably the highlight of my childhood. On the most part, we have a very, you know, edgy relationship as South Africa with Britain. Yeah, like it's so crazy because in South Africa there's like these two countries, Lesotho and Swaziland, and it's the most annoying thing ever because these British protectorates, right? And so what then had happened was, if you're flying to one of these places, if I'm flying from Johannesburg to Swaziland, it's considered international country, which means I have to be at the airport 3 hours before for a 20-minute flight. It is the most annoying thing, and that's all Britain's.
That's one of our legacies. I apologise officially from the UK to all South Africans that you have to have an international flight. Look, Luiso and Pat, thank you for your review of the week. We want to keep you both here for just a moment. We want to introduce a little more Sunday fun into the show.
That's right. We have a new strand called, wait for it, our Sunday Jest.
To prove that faith and funny can mix, we've asked religious leaders to tell us their best joke. Stand by for our first Sunday Jest from Rabbi Mark Levine.
Hello, Sunday Morning Live. Here is my Sunday Jest. The great rabbi was visiting particular towns, and he went to the Cohen household and he met the two young children, Moses, aged 9, and Jacob, aged 7. Calls Moses, the 9-year-old, into the study, and he says to Moses, "Where is God?" Moses doesn't answer. Once again he says, "Moses, where is God?" Once again Moses doesn't answer. And a final time the rabbi leans and he says, "Moses, where is God?" Moses runs out the study, walks straight past his younger brother Jacob down the street, and Jacob calls out, "Moses, Moses, what's wrong?" And Moses looks back to his brother Jacob and he says, "I don't know what's wrong, but God's missing, and they think we took him."
I love that.
Rabbi Mark Levine, brilliant. So, Luiso, you're a comedian. How does he do?
I'll give him a solid 6 out of 10.
That's not bad. That's all right. He's a rabbi, not a comedian. So from the comedian, that's praise indeed. Really good.
I mean, I thank you so much, Pat, and thank you so much, Luiso, for joining us. And huge thanks to Rabbi Mark Levine.